This video is brought to you by my patrons and by viewers like you. In 2023, I decided I wanted to do a fashion zine, highlighting the clothing that my characters wear in my free Not Safe for Work webcomic, Dark Horse. Links for that are in the description. It's only taken an entire year, but I'm finally getting down to that. Let's talk about it. Greetings, groovy people. Welcome to Blue Dragon Art. I'm the self-proclaimed Blue Dragon. This is an art channel where I talk about independent projects, primarily my own projects, but I talk about other indie webcomics and just art-related topics that I feel like covering. If that's up your alley, this is the channel for you. If it's not, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate it. After a whole minute, I'm going to get right down to business. So, I'm part of the Aradia Magical Girl Collective, and every year, they try to put out some kind of project. Sometimes they do more than one project, but one of our full-on collaborative projects was creating a fashion zine back in 2022, I believe. At least 2022 is when it was released. I think we started the whole thing in 2021, but then it was released to the public for free, and you can get to it at the itch.io link in the description, but it was released in 2022. So I had a lot of fun working on that project, in spite of not particularly having a lot of time to really work on my submission. Late 2021 is when my dad's illness with vascular dementia was starting to ramp up. In fact, it was around Thanksgiving, I believe, if recollection serves me right, that things were starting to get really bad. And so 2022... I knew that I was going to be going home to help alleviate my mom and my sister and the work they were doing caring for my father as his, dementia progressed. And so when this project was announced, the most I could do was maybe so there were 4 fashion genres that were included in the zine. Casual wear, the magical girl, transformation wear, fancy wear, and then alternative, just whatever you wanted it to be. And to kind of cut corners to make sure that I got everything done in between, going back and forth between my parents and where I live, which, they live in the Midwest and I live on the West Coast. I came up with the idea to do this paper doll thing, and I did several videos on it, but here's a quick flash of, the artwork that I did and the cover art for the zine that was released in 2022. And in spite of being crunched for time, I actually was relatively proud of the work that I put out, and because I had such a good time and I, got so much inspiration from all of the other collective members and the wonderful art that they contributed and all the work they put into their backgrounds and their characters and the clothing, it really just, they did such a great job that it inspired me to kind of go back and look at the clothing that I had been dressing my characters in the comic. It's not like something like Scooby-Doo where all the characters wear the same clothing every single episode, unless it's there will probably be times in the comic when they are wearing the same clothes, because it's several days in a row and they might not have clothes, and this is a post-apocalyptic world that they're finally in the latest chapter. But there's also magic, so fashion, there's gonna be changes in clothing and stuff. But I digress. I really got inspired to kind of tackle redrawing those clothes in order to work on how I draw clothing in general, trying to work on portraying different materials with different techniques, trying to work on drawing out the patterns. Patterns are things that I've been kind of working on in recent years, trying to make sure that everything is my own as much as possible, or altered to an extent that it's clearly transformed. But for the most part, I'm just redoing my own patterns. Sometimes I do use textures, obviously, but yeah, I thought, this would be really fun to kind of portray these clothes in a more detailed manner, because I am a fan. Personally, as a human being, I don't really explore too terribly much with fashion in my own clothing. I do have specific things that, outfits that I put together and stuff, but I more so appreciate looking at other people's fashions and their ideas. So it's David Bowie, I really liked looking at what the designers would concoct for him, because I don't know that he had too much of a hand in it. There were people who worked for him. Maybe he had ideas of what he wanted. I don't know. I don't know the details, but he is a purveyor, or was a purveyor of fashion, and it was always interesting to me to see what he was wearing. Likewise, I am a big fan of Lady Gaga's music. I liked seeing quite a few of the outfits. The meat dress was fucking tacky and disgusting, but a lot of her outfits I really liked. I thought were, kind of cute. I really liked the way they looked. So, I do like looking at fashion. I'm just kind of, in my personal life, I keep things pared down because I don't really care to express myself in that way very often. Sometimes I do. Now, having said that, when I was younger, I had a lot more variety in my clothing. I had a lot more experimentation. Like, I went through a whole 60s phase, and I never really left that. I wear a lot of plaids now that I'm in the Pacific Northwest, but I wore plaid back then too, though, because I was a big fan of Neil Young. But anyway, not because he wore plaid, but because it's comfortable, and I was like, oh, well, I can look like this. You know what I'm saying? But I had a lot more experimentation. I was much more into getting clothing when I was younger than I was when I hit, my mid-20s and stuff and started thinking about, the global impact of this, that, and the other, and whatever. I mostly buy stuff secondhand now, so art is a way for me to kind of experiment and express myself in that manner. But also the characters in Dark Horse, especially the women, I am trying to recollect outfits that either I or my friends used to wear. Some of the outfits that Kana and Rena have for sure are things that I actually owned and wore, like her skirt and wrap top that is going to be seen in this video. I'll go ahead and throw up the finished outfit just so you can see what I'm talking about if it's not in there in the video now. That's an outfit that I actually had, only obviously the pattern, that's not the pattern that was on it, but I used to wear a lot of clothes like that in high school that kind of had the wrap look, or had bright hippie patterns. Peasant tops that Rena is oftentimes drawn in. I used to wear a lot of peasant tops because those were very reminiscent of the 1960s. Now, obviously, that type of top has been around for ever, but those blouses kind of had a resurgence in popularity at that time, especially if you were trying to look, 60s, 1960s. So with this fashion zine, I'm just trying to have a little bit of fun working on, as best as I can, drawing and portraying different types of materials, different outfits. And later in the series, we'll see kind of a mixing of what was left over from textiles from the time period that, once the industrial US, kind of shut down and contact with the rest of the world for a while at least is paused. That type of fashion sense being mixed with these ancient fae beings, that's something that's going to be kind of more represented in the chapters to come now that the characters have finally made the leap to their present, which would be their future, but it's present day, to be clear. This is just something that I've been having some fun with. I wanted to really get into the nitty-gritty drawing Queen Candace's dress that's on the first act cover of Dark Horse. That dress I had a lot of fun designing. I got a lot of inspiration from different places, but I feel it feels very of the time, because when I started working on things like that cover, and I can show you the old original art is not very good, but this was in the early 2000s. So whereas time kind of stops in 1999, I feel like with any decade, the fashion from the tail end of the decade kind of dovetails obviously into the beginning of the next decade. So I think that it's still representative, but it's also different enough, But those big, long gloves were inspired by films like Breakfast at Tiffany's with Audrey Hepburn, and so that kind of 1960s coming back around. Hepburn was very popular. I remember when I was in high school with the pedal pushers, and they're called capris, but they were in the 50s and 60s called pedal pushers. And I very distinctly remember an Old Navy commercial that was really pushing. The pedal pushers. And it had like an AC/DC song in the background, you know.
We're not inhibited. The girl wants to dance.
But anyway, that's like one of the commercials that I remember. And Candies were very popular. Adverts for those shoes. Candies was like a brand. I don't know if it still is or not, but they had like this Jenny McCarthy who for some reason was very popular. But I remember how controversial this one ad was of her sitting on a toilet wearing these Candies shoes. And the ad wasn't on TV, y'all. It was in like these Young Miss. Young Miss is the only one that I ever got. YM is what it was called. That's the only like fashion magazine I ever got. I don't know, man. I don't think it does not exist anymore. I looked it up. It stopped being printed not that long ago, actually. I don't think, maybe it wasn't, no. Maybe it was longer ago than I think, but at any rate, this was like such a controversial ad at the time. But the big platform shoes and stuff like that had been coming back into fashion. And actually, I don't want to get too much into this, but like the character Kana who we're seeing in this video, her given name is Candice. She hates the nickname Candie, and part of why she hates that nickname is because of the Candie shoes and the ads, and she's very conservative. And, you know, like I said, it was a big stinking to-do that this chick was on the toilet wearing these shoes. So that's kind of like, if you weren't there, even if you were there, you might not understand. You don't need to get it, but that was my own little inside joke that I put in there as part of why she hates that nickname so bad. Outside of it just being kind of not really something, it's not a name she likes. She prefers Kana. She thinks Kana sounds a little bit different. Candie and Candice is a very common name, and she views it as very boring and unoriginal. But being called Kana helps her feel like she stands out a little bit, at least in the US at that time. There's a lot of things going to be touched upon in this fashion zine. I'm going to also talk a little bit about why I designed the character's hair the way I did. Like that kind of thing, those choices in more detail within this zine. So expect us to hear more about this project as I move along. I've had a really good time talking about this. Sorry if it's not for everyone. It's not a tutorial. It's not some indie thing that you can check out unless you want to read my comic, but my channel is about having fun and talking about what I want to talk about and hoping that other people find it interesting too. So I hope you did. That's about all I got to say about this. I hope you all have a lovely rest of the week. Peace and love. Fare you well. And keep on trucking. And now that we're at the end of the video, if you feel like supporting the channel or my comic or whatever, I've got links to Patreon and Subscribestar down in the description. Thank you. Bye.